I still remember the exact little ritual: coffee, slippers, the same browser bookmark for my bank. That morning I clicked the link, expecting the usual numbers I'd watched pile up for 30 years. A stubborn little cushion for dentist bills, a trip I kept promising myself, the kind of boring safety everyone my age holds on to. Instead, the screen looked like a cruel joke. Zeros where commas should have been. My heart did something I hadn't felt since my husband died. It dropped and then sped up like a car that can't decide whether to crash or swerve. At first I thought it was an error. I refreshed. Nothing changed. I called the bank like a person calling a friend at midnight, voice shaking as if the clerk could hand me my money through the phone. "Ma'am, I'm seeing the same on my end," the woman said, all practiced calm, the kind that tells you there's no good news coming. I wrote down the fraud hotline number like a mantra and punched it into my phone. While I waited on hold, my mind scrambled through explanations. A computer glitch, identity theft, some scam I should have guarded against. I pulled up account statements. Every transaction, every ridiculous grocery receipt I'd kept, because I'm a person who saves receipts for no good reason. Then I saw it. Transfers. Multiple transfers, the kind that don't look like a scam, because they went to people I knew. My son's name was on one of them. I shouldn't have felt surprised. I'd watched him grow from a messy-eyed boy into a man who'd moved back home more than once. But there's a difference between forgiving a late rent check and discovering every stitch of your life erased. 4 transfers, one after another, the total adding up to the balance I had worried about for years. My hands trembled as I scrolled. There were notes attached, like a casual memo a neighbor might leave. Loan, will pay back. Trip expenses. The bank had the timestamps. The transfers were recent. The dates stabbed at me. I called his number. It went straight to voicemail. He'd never let a call go to voicemail if he could help it. I texted, "Call me now." 3 dots appeared and vanished, and finally, nothing. A knot of panic and anger loosened into something sharper. I called my daughter-in-law, my voice thin and more brittle than I intended. "Do you know anything about transfers from Mom's account?" I kept it neutral. I thought I could put the pieces together without losing my head. She answered like she was reading off a script. "Oh, Mom, don't worry. It's just money for the trip. We'll pay you back," she said, the words too light, like frosting over something rotten. I heard laughter in the background. Women's voices, excited, like people counting vacation days. Her tone had that practiced casualness that people use when they're covering a lie. I stood up then and walked aimless circles through the house, the kind of motion you do when you try to think and not faint. I imagined them on a plane, my money lined under their suitcases, my name on their itinerary. All the tiny private plans I'd made, the solo trip I'd promised myself, the new heating pump for the house, evaporated in a second. Anger rose, but so did something colder. The recognition that this was deliberate. Not a mistake, not a desperate act. It was a decision made over coffee and scheduling apps, and whispered to a mother-in-law who probably smiled and told them it was fine. The funeral for the life I expected to have hasn't happened yet, but the announcements had been sent. I sat down at my kitchen table and stared at the laptop until the screen blurred, and in that blur, a single thought, hard as flint, formed. I would not be a victim who quietly counted her losses. Not if it was my son's hand in this. Not if they were on someone else's sunbed with my name in their pockets. I breathed, slow and deliberate, and for the first time since I saw the balance, I felt the edges of a plan sharpening inside me. Not the sort that would be petty or childish, but something patient. For now, I called the bank again, filed the report, wrote down numbers and case IDs, a litany of proof like a prayer. Later, I told myself, I would figure out how to make them understand the weight of what they'd taken. But in that kitchen, with the sunlight falling like a spotlight on an ordinary day gone wrong, all I felt was the hollow, clear hunger of a mother betrayed. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there at the table, the kitchen light buzzing softly, staring at the printouts from the bank like they might rearrange themselves into a version of reality I could live with. By morning, my hands were cramped from writing notes, dates, times, transaction IDs, names. My son's name, his wife's, even her mother's. The woman I'd barely spoken to outside of birthdays and a few tense holidays. By noon, I couldn't take the waiting anymore. I called him again. This time the phone rang. When he picked up, his voice had that strange mix of guilt and irritation. The tone people use when they're caught, but still think they can talk their way out of it. "Mom, can we not do this right now? We're away for a few days," he said, as if I were asking about laundry. "Away where?" I asked, already knowing. He hesitated just long enough for the truth to hum through the silence. "Bali," he said finally. "We needed a break. You know how stressful things have been." I almost laughed. "You needed a break? With what? My retirement?" "Mom," he started, but I cut him off. "Don't you mom me. I saw the transfers, Jacob. You emptied everything. You didn't even leave enough for my bills this month." He sighed, long and theatrical, like I was being unreasonable. "It's not like that. I was going to pay it back. We just needed to get away, clear our heads. You always said money's not everything." I went quiet then. Because how do you respond when your own child turns your words into a weapon? I finally said, "You stole from me, not borrowed. Stole. And you think a vacation is your therapy? With her and her mother?" He snapped back. "They're my family too." That hit harder than I expected. His family. As if I were just some distant relative now. I could hear his wife's laughter in the background, soft, filtered through waves and wind, maybe, and something in me cracked. "I hope it's a nice trip," I said quietly, "because it'll be the last one you ever take with my money." Then I hung up. For a long time, I just sat there, shaking. It wasn't about the money, not entirely. It was about what that money represented. The trust, the years of working double shifts, of saying no to things I wanted so he could have more. I'd covered his first car, his college shortfall, even bailed him out when his first business fell apart. I told myself it was what mothers did, but this was different. That afternoon I drove to the bank. I made them print out every page of my account history. The manager, a young man with kind eyes, offered me tea while explaining that since I had technically authorized him on my account years ago, there wasn't much they could do. I'd trusted him enough to give him access when he was helping me with online banking. I felt like a fool. When I got home, I sat on the edge of my bed, the folder in my lap, and started going through old photos on my phone. Him at 15, grinning, holding the dog. Him at 20, hugging me after his father's funeral. Him at 29, nervous on his wedding day. Every picture looked like someone I used to know. That night, I called his wife. She answered on the second ring, her voice sweet like syrup. "Hi, Mom. How are you?" "Don't call me that," I said flatly. There was silence. Then I said, "You and your mother enjoy the trip. When you get back, don't come near my house." Her voice cracked a little. "Wait. What? You can't just—" "I can," I said, "and I will." I hung up and blocked both their numbers. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat down with my notebook, and started writing a list. Not of what I'd lost, but of what I could still control. Because if they thought I was just going to sit quietly while they spent my life savings sipping cocktails on a beach, they didn't know me at all. They were about to learn that the woman they'd underestimated all their lives still had a few lessons left to teach, and one of them was going to hurt. 2 weeks after that phone call, they came back. I knew the exact moment because the doorbell rang, and when I looked through the peephole, there they were, tan, smiling, wearing airport hoodies and sunglasses perched on their heads like some glossy magazine couple. My son stood a step behind his wife, who was holding shopping bags. It was the bags that did it. The bright designer logos, the careless tilt of her wrist. My money hanging from her hand like a trophy. I didn't open the door at first. I just looked at them, that small pane of glass between us, feeling the kind of quiet that doesn't come from calm. It comes from rage that's past boiling. Then I unlocked it and stepped aside. He smiled, hesitant. "Mom, can we talk?" "Talk," I said. They walked in, and I noticed she didn't even take off her shoes. Straight through to the living room, like she still belonged there. My son looked around like he was seeing the place for the first time. Maybe he was. Maybe guilt makes familiar things strange. I didn't offer them coffee, didn't ask how the flight was. I just sat down in my chair and said, "So, tell me how you justify stealing from your mother." His jaw clenched. "Mom, please don't use that word." "What word would you prefer? Taking advantage? Robbery with emotional attachment?" He sighed, rubbed his face. "I already told you. We needed a break. Things have been rough for us lately." "Rough?" I cut in. "You don't even pay rent. You don't pay bills. What's been rough, Jacob? The Wi-Fi speed?" His wife shifted beside him. "We were planning to pay you back. You're blowing this out of proportion." "Out of proportion?" I said, my voice shaking. "You emptied my account, my entire savings. That's not out of proportion. That's a crime. But you wouldn't know that, would you? Because your kind of people think consequences are optional." Her face flushed. "My kind of people?" "The kind who leech off others and think it's love." Jacob stood up then, voice rising. "Don't talk to her like that." "Sit down," I said quietly. The tone must have surprised him, because he did. I leaned forward, looking him straight in the eye. "I gave you everything, every damn thing I could, and you took it like it was your right. Not because you needed to survive, but because you could, because you knew I wouldn't fight you." He didn't meet my eyes. "I made a mistake, okay? I'll fix it." "How?" I asked. "How do you plan to fix $58,000? Sell those bags?" I pointed at his wife's lap. She flinched, clutched them closer. "Mom," he said again, softer this time. "We'll figure something out. Maybe I can get a loan or—" I laughed, short and bitter. "A loan? You already had one, from me." For a long time none of us spoke. I could hear the refrigerator humming. Outside a car passed. Just the small, cruel noises of life going on as if nothing had happened. Then I said, "You have 1 week to pay me back. Every cent. If you don't, I'm pressing charges." His head snapped up. "You wouldn't." "I would," I said. "And I will. Because I've spent my whole life protecting you from the world. Maybe it's time I let the world teach you something I couldn't." He stared at me, shocked, betrayed, maybe even scared. "Mom, please, don't do this." "Don't do what?" I said quietly. "Hold you accountable?" He didn't answer. His wife grabbed his arm, whispering, "Let's go." And they did. When the door shut behind them, I felt hollow, like someone had scooped everything out of me and left only air. But under that emptiness, something steadier was growing. The calm of a decision made. Because he still thought I was bluffing. Still thought the word mother meant mercy. He was about to learn it could also mean justice. After they left that day, the house felt heavier. It wasn't silence. It was something thicker, like disappointment soaked into the walls. Everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of him. The old-school photo on the mantel, the mug he made me in 2nd grade, the crooked birdhouse in the backyard he built with his father, I should have taken comfort in those things, but all they did was remind me how far we'd fallen. I didn't hear from him for a few days. Then the calls started. First from numbers I didn't recognize. His friends probably, asking me to let it go, that family shouldn't fight over money. One even had the nerve to tell me I was too old to start drama. I blocked them all. Then came his wife. Long, tearful voicemails saying she was sorry, that it was all her idea, that he didn't want to do it. Lies. I could hear rehearsed guilt in every syllable. The following week, I went to the police. Filing that report was the hardest thing I've ever done. My hands shook the entire time, not from fear, but from the weight of it. The officer, young, probably my son's age, was gentle but professional. He asked if I was sure I wanted to proceed, told me how this could destroy our relationship permanently. I said, "It's already destroyed." He nodded and started typing. The sound of those keys, clack, 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 felt like a hammer nailing shut a coffin. When I left the station, it was raining. I didn't even use my umbrella. I just walked to the car, soaked through, my body trembling but my mind strangely clear. By the time I got home, there were 12 missed calls from Jacob. I didn't answer. Later that night, I found him waiting on my porch. His car was parked crooked in the driveway, and he looked nothing like the man who'd come home from Bali. His eyes were red, his hair unkempt, his voice cracking the moment he said, "Mom, please don't do this." "Do what?" I asked through the door. "Press charges. I'll give it back, I swear. I just need some time." "You had time," I said. "You had years of it. Every time I bailed you out, every time I made excuses for you, every time I believed you'd grow up. And look where that's gotten me." He stepped closer. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. We thought—" "We?" I cut in. "You mean her and her mother?" "Oh, I know exactly what you thought. You thought I was too old, too soft, too desperate for your love to ever stand up for myself." He looked down, shame creeping up his neck. "I made a mistake," he whispered. "No," I said. "You made a choice." He started to cry then. Real broken sobs that might have reached me years ago. But not now. I'd spent too many nights crying over his mistakes, defending him to people who warned me he'd take advantage of me. When he realized I wasn't opening the door, he slammed his palm against it, yelling, "You're ruining my life!" I laughed, a sound that surprised even me. "No, Jacob, you ruined mine first." He left after that, tires screeching down the street, headlights disappearing into the dark. I stood there for a long time, staring at the wet footprints he'd left on my porch. I should have felt victorious, I guess. Strong. But I didn't. I just felt tired. Tired in a way that seeps into your bones. That night, I sat by the window, looking out at the empty street, and thought about what comes after betrayal. You can't unsee it. You can't unfeel it. You just learn to build around it. But something inside me had shifted. The kind of shift that doesn't go away. And when I woke up the next morning, I knew exactly what I was going to do next. It wasn't just about justice anymore. It was about teaching him that some lessons cost everything. The morning after that last confrontation, I woke up before sunrise. I hadn't really slept. I'd just lain there, eyes open, watching shadows crawl across the ceiling until the sky began to turn grey. Something in me had hardened overnight. The kind of hardness that doesn't come from anger anymore, but from clarity. For months, maybe years, I'd been walking around half blind to the truth. That my son didn't just make bad choices. He counted on me to clean them up. Every time. I was his safety net, his fallback, the person he knew would always forgive. And like a fool, I did. But not anymore. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my notebook. A new page, At the top, I wrote one word: rebuild. But beneath it, I started listing steps that didn't sound like rebuilding at all. Not yet. Close joint accounts. Contact lawyer. Remove his name from anything with mine on it. Call the landlord of their apartment. Speak to his employer. That last one, the employer, was where the real plan began. You see, I had been the one who got him that job. My friend Helen, who'd worked in HR there for 20 years, had vouched for him because of me. I was the reason he'd gotten that second chance after the mess at his previous company. I still had Helen's number, and I still had every text from him bragging about how indispensable he was there. By lunchtime, I called Helen. "I need to ask you something," I said. My voice was calm, maybe too calm. "Of course, what's going on?" "Do you still have that policy where you can't employ someone under financial investigation?" There was a pause. "Yes." "Why?" I exhaled. "Because there's a report being filed for theft and fraud against Jacob." Helen didn't say anything for a moment. When she did, her voice was careful. "I'm so sorry, love." "It's fine," I said. "I just thought you should know before it becomes public." I hung up, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't cry. I felt steady. Then I called the landlord. The apartment was in my name. When Jacob first moved in, he hadn't had the credit or the savings, so I co-signed for him. That too was ending. I gave notice that I'd be removing myself from the lease and that I wouldn't be covering any further payments. Next, I visited my lawyer, an older man who'd handled my husband's estate years ago. I told him everything: the money, the account, the trip. He listened, nodding slowly, then said, "I can make sure he has no legal access to any of your assets going forward. But are you sure you want to go this far?" "I've spent my whole life not going far enough," I said. When I left his office, I felt lighter. Not happier, but lighter. Like someone finally stepping out of a burning house. Over the next few days, I followed through on every step. Closed every account. Changed every password. Sold a few of the smaller things I'd once planned to leave him. The police case was already in motion. But this was personal. I wasn't just taking my life back. I was pulling the rug out from under his. On the 5th day, Helen called me back. "He was let go this morning," she said quietly. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Thank you," I said. And when I hung up, I allowed myself one small smile. Not because I wanted him to suffer, but because, for once, he'd finally have to stand on his own. No mother's wallet, no soft landing. That night, I took the last of his things. Boxes of old clothes, trophies, a few photos, and left them on the porch. I didn't leave a note. He'd know what it meant. As I turned off the porch light, I whispered to the empty street, "Lesson 1, Jacob. You can't build your life on someone else's sacrifice." And deep down, I knew the real revenge wasn't in what I'd done already. It was in what was still to come. It took about 2 weeks for everything to unravel. I didn't need to lift another finger. I'd already set the dominoes in place. And when they began to fall, they did it beautifully. The first call came from him. I didn't answer, of course, but the voicemail played long enough to hear panic in his voice. "Mom, please, the landlord's threatening to evict us. He said you pulled out of the lease. What's going on?" I sat on my couch with a cup of tea, listening, unmoved. The next day, another voicemail. "They let me go. No warning, no severance, just gone. What am I supposed to do now?" That one hurt a little, not because I regretted it, but because I could still hear that child in him, the boy who used to call me Mommy when he was scared. But I reminded myself, he chose this path. A week later, There was a knock on my door. It was his wife, mascara smudged, hair tied back, voice shaking. "Please, can we just talk?" I opened the door just enough to see her face. "You shouldn't be here." "Please," she said again. "We're being kicked out. We can't find another place. No one will rent to us, not with everything going on. And Jacob's, he's falling apart." I let her talk. She told me how he'd tried to fix things, how he'd gone to the bank to ask for a payment plan, how he'd tried calling every day. She said she'd even pawned some of her jewelry. When she finished, I said, "That's what people do when they face consequences." Her eyes filled with tears. "You can't be this cruel. He's your son." "I was his mother when he needed love," I said. "He made me his victim when he needed money." I closed the door slowly. Her sobs echoed through the wood, but I didn't open it again. Over the next few days, the messages turned bitter, from pleading to angry to desperate again. "You've ruined everything," one text said. Another, "You think you're teaching me something, but all you're doing is pushing me away." I read them all and never replied. Then one night, around 10 p.m., there was another knock, this time quieter. I opened the door, and there he was. Jacob. No wife, no pretense, no arrogance. Just a broken man standing in the same spot where he'd once screamed at me. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes hollow. "Can I come in?" he asked. I hesitated, then stepped aside. He walked in, looked around and said softly, "It smells the same." I didn't say anything. He sat down, put his head in his hands, and let out a long, shuddering breath. "I messed up," he said finally. "I thought I could handle things. I thought you'd always be there." "I was," I said, "until you made sure I couldn't be." He looked up at me, tears clinging to his lashes. "I lost everything. The job, the apartment, her. Even her mum won't talk to me now." "Maybe that's what it takes to start over," I said. He shook his head. "I don't know how." I took a slow sip of my tea, studying him. "Then learn, the same way I had to when your father died. No one rescued me. I figured it out." He wiped his face. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just didn't think you'd really do all this." I leaned forward, my voice steady. "You took my trust, my security, my peace, and you turned it into your vacation fund. You didn't just take money, Jacob. You took the years I spent believing in you, and you thought you'd never have to pay for it." He nodded slowly, shame written all over him. "So this is your revenge?" he asked. "No," I said. "This is my boundary." He looked confused for a second, then just nodded again. Before he left, he turned back at the door. "I'll find a way to make it right. I don't know how yet, but I will." I didn't answer. I just watched him walk down the porch steps, his shoulders slumped under the weight of his own choices. And when he disappeared into the dark, I finally exhaled. It wasn't satisfaction I felt, not exactly. It was peace, the kind that comes when you finally stop bleeding for someone who keeps reopening your wounds. But something told me this story wasn't done yet. Because one day soon, he'd come back. Not for money, but for something else. Something harder. And I'd have to decide whether I was ready to give it. Subscribe for the next part.